Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, your king, King Clifford Jefferson, our sons of Godfrey, the fifth count of Van Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know here at the Third Temple English Church of England is the King of Peace. I greet you in the name of my queen, Sister Godwinson, from the house of Godwinson. I greet you in the name of Archbishop Belmont from the house of Belmont, as well as Bishop Searcy from the house of Searcy. I greet you in the name of the ancestors who have gone and passed before us, as well as those who are here, who are trying to get an understanding of what it is we are called to do, as well as those who will be our predecessors, all right? Or I mean, parts of our successors. So it's very important to understand that what we do here determines what we all look for, and we, as we call it, redemption process. All right, the redemption process lies here. It's been here as of May 23rd, 2024, which is the birth year 2974. I'm here with another marvelous lecture, which is actually part 3 from the previous lecture that I did in regards to the Garden of Eden, the Livery of Seisin, and the Banishment. Once again, the Garden of Eden, Livery of Seisin, and the Banishment. Okay, this is part 3, right? So we're going to be getting started shortly. To all those who are going to be joining me, please make sure you got your pencil and your pens and your paper, right? I'll be with you in a second. I know it's early in the morning. I'm sorry, but the job must get done. Job must get. Within the past 2 lectures that I did, we talked about, or I pretty much summed up the what we call the wars of the Anglo-Spanish Wars and the Anglo and French Wars. So the Anglo-Spanish Wars and Anglo-French Wars, which were originally part of what we call the First 100-Year Wars, and which were a series of wars that lasted for hundreds of years. Shortly after the first 100-Year Wars, you have what we call the War of the Roses, right? The War of the Roses took place as a result of the cadet branches of the Plantagenet ground, which were the Lancasters and the York branches fighting amongst themselves over who would inherit the English throne. And as a result of that, William the Conqueror invaded England, and parts of Henry VII, from the founders of the House of Tudors, by way of conquest, took over the Lancaster branch, which ushered in what we call the what we call did he call it? Not the Ryan Right of Kings, but something, a term that William the Conqueror called it, the supremacy, something dealing with the Supremacy Act or something like that. The Supremacy Act. All right, this is when Henry VII came to height with establishing the House of Tudors. All right, he also connected with the House of Stuarts through what we call the Treaty of Perpetual Peace of 1502 with the marriage of Margaret of Tudor and Henry the Fourth. And King James the Fourth. All right, we know that the plantation of Ulster, which was a Scottish Irish colonization plan such by King James the First from the House of Stuarts. Okay, and we know that was in uh, in the 16th century or 17th century as well. Okay, so the plantation also was the colonization plan here in North America. All right, and we know that King James descendants were descendants from what we call the House of Stuart. All right, from the House of Stuart. So very much, if you're following along, you got to remember these things because they're going to come up all the time. All right, and it's very important that you have be accessible to that information, which is going to be locked up in here. All right, you can't carry a whole bunch of books around with you. All right, it has to be stored here. All right, the mainframe. All right, so once again, we discussed the Anglo and Spanish Wars and the Anglo and French Wars, which were wars which took place over here on this continent. All right, on this continent, because we have what we call New Spain and New France, which was under the jurisdiction of the Kingdom of Spain and the Kingdom of France. Over here on this continent, which was at that time called the Anglosphere. Okay, the Anglosphere. We know that the Anglosphere was based upon the English overseas possession. All right, we know that during that overseas possession, starting with Ashton, that there were invaders who came to the Anglosphere in lieu of what we call right of conquest, which starts with the what we call Carolingian dynasty, which encompasses Harold Canute, Canute the Great, Harold Bluetooth. These are Danish rulers. Okay, this leads to what we call the Battle of Bundaberg. All right, and the Battle of Bundaberg, this involved Edward the Confessor. All right, Edward the Confessor, one of the last ruling kings of the kings of Wessex. All right, from this you have William the Conqueror entry into the picture. All right, entering England in 1066. All right, and in 1066, this is an account where the Jews also enter into what we call England. Okay, all right, so we know, and the Jews that entered into England were called the Ashkenazi Jews, which came there through what we call the Jewish diaspora, what we call the continent of what we call Africa. All right, the continent of Africa. All right, they came from Egypt, Jerusalem, or they might have came from somewhere else. But I know it happened to be either on the continent of Asia, Europe, and Africa. We know Britain, England, and Ireland is not a part of the continent of Europe, Africa, and Asia because it's considered part of what we call the Anglosphere. Okay, the Anglosphere. We must understand that. We're gonna pretty much go over what we went over yesterday or for the past 2 days and get a better understanding, all concerning the six civilized tribes. Okay, the six civilized tribes here in North America who have or assume to have some type of claim, a right to the land. All right, and that is in fee simple. That claim of right that the Native Americans have called Indians was nothing more than fee simple. Okay, we know that prior to the fee simple estate, that the land was entailed based upon those kings who ruled within this Anglosphere, who was at conflict with the Frankish kings. Okay, yes, the Frankish kings or the Franco kings through their alliances with the Scottish kings and every other alliance that they saw fit to be able to use to their advantage to take over the territories that were governed by the Anglosphere, which once again goes back to Ashton. All right, Ashton of 927. 1 second. Yeah. Everything all right? Okay. All right, boo boo. Okay. The Anglosphere. All right. We're gonna pretty much go back over the information we discussed in the past two lectures, but we're gonna go more in depth into that information that you heard through the past two lectures. Okay. So I hope you are good followers because it's pretty much once you do things uh premeditative, it becomes a part of you, it becomes secondary, okay, secondary nature. All right. So hopefully by you continuing to log on to the platform, you'll be able to catch on and become adaptable to the frequency that we're usually on here at the Third Tippet English Church of England. Okay. So once again, we're just going to reiterate what we already know about here in North America concerning the 13 colonies, not just 13 colonies, but as well as the territories that was west of the 13 colonies, which we know that territories concerning Spain and France, which we know, according to history, it was called New Spain and New France, ruled by the Kingdom of France and the Kingdom of Spain, all right, which is on the European continent, or what they call the continent of Iberia, which encompasses France and Spain, all right. So it's very important that you pay attention to what's being said. If there's any question, please place them in the chat. And without further ado, we get started with this marvelous lecture. Part 3. We're going to start with the American Enlightenment. We talked about in previous podcasts, we talked about the Scottish Enlightenment. The Scottish Enlightenment came in the 18th century as a result of the uh, uh, Jewish diaspora. And as a result of the Scottish Enlightenment, started the Scottish diaspora, all right, where the information that they were enlightened with, they took around the world, all right. So this brings on the American Enlightenment because Scotland, known as Great Britain or the British Crown, are the ones who gave America their start, along with some assistance of France or the Frankish kingdom or the Frankish Empire. Okay, so we already discussed that. Hopefully, you can make it the connection. I'll be in studious to what's already been presented before you. If not, that means you got to continue to go back and study. Okay, so the American Enlightenment. It's all going to connect to what we discussed in my past 2 lectures concerning the Garden of Eden, Livery of Seisin, and the Banishment. Okay. The American Enlightenment was a period of intellectual and philosophical fervor in the 13 American colonies in the 18th and 19th century. This led to the American Revolution and the creation of the United States. So we know that goes back to the Articles of Confederation, the First and Second Continental Congress, the Confederation, and then the 1787 Confederation in Philadelphia, in York, Pennsylvania. Okay. The American Enlightenment was influenced by the 17th and 18th century age of enlightenment in Europe and Native American philosophy. According to James McGregor Burns, the spirit of the American Enlightenment was to give Enlightenment ideas a practical, useful form in the life of the nation and its people. Okay. A non-denominational moral philosophy replaced theology in many college curriculums. Some colleges reformed their curricula to include natural philosophy, science, modern astronomy, and mathematics, and new model American style colleges were founded. Politically, the age is distinguished by an emphasis upon equality under the law, economic liberty, republicanism, and religious tolerance, as clearly expressed in the United States Declaration of Independence. Okay? In the United States Declaration of Independence. Some of the founding fathers or some of the leaders of this American philosophy was Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and George Washington. Okay. European sources. Sources of the American Enlightenment are many and vary according to time and place. As a result of an extensive book trade with Great Britain, the colonies were well acquainted with European literature almost contemporary, contemporary, contemporaneously. Early influences were English writers including James Harrington, Algernon Sidney, the Viscount Bolingbroke, John Trechart, Thomas Gordon, especially the two Cato letters, and Joseph Addison, whose tragedy Cato was extremely popular. A particularly important English legal writer was William Blackstone, whose commentaries on the laws of England served as a major influence on the American founders and is a key source in the development of Anglo-American common law. Although Locke's two treaties of a government has long been cited as a major influence on American thinkers, historian David Lundberg and Henry F. May demonstrate that Locke's essays concerning the human understanding was far more widely reading than were his political treaties. Okay? Remember that Locke, two treaties of government. All right? John Locke, two treaties of government. Remember that. The Scottish Enlightenment also influenced American thinkers. David Hume's essay in the history of England were widely read in the colonies. There's your source. And Hume's political thought had a particular influence on Madison in the drafting of the United States Constitution. Francis Hutchison's ideas of ethics, along with notions of civility and politeness developed by Earl of Shaftesbury and Addison and Richard Steele, and their Spectator, were a major influence on upper-class American colonists who sought to emulate European manners and learning. Okay? That's dealing with sources, all right? That's dealing with sources. So those sources are going to come back up, especially the ones dealing with the two treaties of government by John Locke. Okay? The two treaties of government by John Locke. We already aware of William Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England, but I have the whole volume right here in my closet here. All right. But specifically, the information concerning the two treaties of government concerning John Locke is what we're going to focus on today, in lieu of what we call the American Enlightenment, which was preceded by the Scottish Enlightenment. Okay? We, we must understand what's going on. Right? So I'm going to be hitting and missing. Yeah. In the decades before the American Revolution, 1776, the intellectual and political leaders of the colonies studied history intently, looking for guides or models for good and bad government. Okay? They especially followed the development of the Republican idea in England. That's the Commonwealth. Okay? That is the Commonwealth. There's your source. The Lamp of Experience, Whigs, History, and Intellectual Origin of the American Revolution. All those who are studious, please get that source right there. All right. So we see that most of the founding fathers, most of the colonies took a great interest in the laws that were developed in England in regards to the model which makes up a good and bad parliament. Okay. A good and bad parliament. A good parliament is that which is de jure. A bad parliament is that which is de facto. We know under Commonwealth is not operating with king and parliament. It's just the parliament acting on behalf of the king. So that's the bad parliament, which they call a rump parliament, versus the good government, which is what we call the royal prerogatives of the king. All right? The royal prerogatives of the king. So we must understand where American enlightenment came from. All right? Where American enlightenment came from. Declaration of Independence. The United States Declaration of Independence, which was primarily written by Thomas Jefferson, was adopted by the Second Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776. The text of the section of the Declaration of Independence reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Okay? This is the same uh uh type of independence that was done by the place, what was called the uh what's it called? Uh place system, playman system, or place what, fair play men or fair play system, which is basically squatters. Okay. Basically squatters we talked about in my last video. So all those who didn't catch it, please go back and check that out. Okay. Behold, these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. All right. This is where what their enlightenment came from. Okay. This is what their enlightenment was based upon. All right. Whatever they received to instruct them into this enlightenment. Okay. Very important. This was done through a separation of church and state. All right. This was a separation of church and state. This is where the enlightenment came from. We got to get from under religious persecution because the government was a fusional government under the crown. They wanted to get away from that religious persecution that was under the Church of England, under the Roman Catholic Church. They wasn't under the English Church; it was under the Roman Catholic Church, called the Church of England, who converted the Anglo-Saxon into Christianity. All right. Separation of church and state is a metaphor paraphrased by Thomas Jefferson, used by others in discussion regarding the Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which reads Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. But yet we see Thomas Jefferson calling out to his creator. Okay? Thomas Jefferson is calling out to his creator for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But yet you separated church from state. Okay? You separated church from state, which had a God. All right. I don't know whether that God was a person practicing life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but there was a God being represented as a part of that church, and which you separated by the first, what we call the First Amendment. All right, which was rooted in other presidents. All right. So you didn't call upon those other presidents that separate the church that the First Amendment you call religious freedom was based upon, because the prejudice that was based upon prior to the separation of church and state in your First Amendment was based upon the Establishment Clause. Okay, the Establishment Clause. All right, it's very, very important for us to continue to go over this with our members, because if you don't, you will not have a clue about your earthly salvation. Okay, again. All right. So we see Thomas Jefferson separated church and state, as well as the religious freedom, which was submitted to the House of Burgess in regard to the religious freedom, in which he called upon for his creator for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which was what American enlightenment came from. All right. By way of July 4th, 1776, Declaration of Independence. All right. It says here Jefferson realized even though he separated church and state, he recognized what position they were in. All right. He recognized that outside of that church was the wilderness, and inside that church was the garden. Okay. Was God's garden protected by that candlestick. Okay. We read it here. When they, the church, have opened a gap in the hedge or wall of separation between the garden of the church and the wilderness of the world, God has ever broke down the wall itself, removed the candlestick, etc., and made his garden a wilderness as it end in this day. All right. So Thomas Jefferson was talking about the the state that they were in, which was the state called the wilderness. All right. As a result of that candlestick being removed, as well as it wasn't part of God's garden. Okay, it wasn't part of God's garden. The garden and the wilderness were separated. The wilderness was the world, and God's church was the garden. Okay, God's church was the garden. All right, and that therefore, if He will, we're talking about the Creator, ever pleased to restore His garden in paradise again, He must of necessity be walled in peculiarly unto Himself from the world. And all that be saved out of the world are to be transplanted out of the wilderness of that world. Okay? Transplanted out of the wilderness of that world. All right. So we understand that Thomas Jefferson creator could not do that. Okay. Thomas Jefferson creator could not do that because Thomas Jefferson creator was a creator that did not exist. He didn't even know his creator. Why? Because he was calling on life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as a result of the First Amendment, which is based upon other presidents, in which God was in the picture. All right. God had a problem with him and his descendants, but God was in the picture. Okay. Which we know it because God represented that candlestick, okay? That light. We must understand that. In keeping with the lack of the established state religion in the United States, unlike in many European nations at the time, Article 6 of the United States Constitution specified that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust. Any office or public trust. Office and trust is one and the same under the United States, meaning that there will be no official state religion lawfully established. Why? Because they could not sit on the trust estate that was governed under the church. All right? They couldn't govern the estate that was governed by the church because that was governed under what we call statute or mortmain, a dead pledge. The property remains a part of the church because it was called entail, entail or feetail. Once again, entail or feetail estate, which was an estate going back to that Garden of Eden concerning Adam and Eve, who were protected by that candlestick until they came out into the world by way of being deceived by that snake. Okay? By being deceived by that snake. Okay? So where does the snake come in symbolically of that Garden of Eden, which was separate from the world? But Thomas Jefferson was not in that Garden of Eden. He was in the world. Okay? As in his days, and knew that in order for uh, to restore God's garden, all right, and paradise again, it must of necessity be walled peculiarly unto himself from the world, and all to be saved out of the world or to be transplanted out of the wilderness of the world, meaning that that wall must be built again. Okay? That wall must be built again. All right? Where nothing can break the fusion of government. Okay, nothing can break the fusion of government, which we call the social compact, which we call the social contract. Okay, the social compact or the social contract. Okay, and the social contract or the social compact based off the what we call the separate of church and state, which is based upon the establishment clause. We talked about that already. I'm just going to hit that real quick before we move forward. In the United States, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Clause, together with the Amendment Free Exercise Clause, form the constitutional right of freedom of religion. We know all this takes place in Philadelphia, okay, and the 1787 Convention, all right? It all takes place in Philadelphia, which was territorial claimed by William Penn, all right? Territory claimed by William Penn, all right, who made treaties with Native Americans, Indians, all right, the six civilized tribes William Penn made treaties with, all right? And the treaties that they made with the Native Americans were not based off them being heirs to the land, all right? It was based off the Native Americans transferring and conveying the land for compensation, all right? And we know that was fee simple, all right? Conveyance, all right? Fee simple conveyance, all right? But yet still using the Livery of Seisin ceremonial that was done going all the way back to Adam and Eve. Whether you understand it from an abstract perspective or a concrete perspective, you can take your pick. I'm giving you both, so you can make your choice. Okay, so let's deal with um, the Enlightenment that America got, which was based upon uh, things such as the William Blackstone commentaries of England, as well as the second treaties of government. All right, the treaties of government. All right, because we're reading based off the First Amendment, religious freedom, that by way of the separation of church and state, that there is no candlestick lighting the way back to the garden. Okay, there's no candlestick lighting the way back to the garden until this day. I am that candlestick. All right, lighting the way back to the garden. And that garden is what you call Jersey. All right, New Jerusalem. All right, New Jerusalem, the crown. Okay, it's very important for you to understand that you must associate it with the body of politics of New Jersey under the authority of the crown and not the incorporated states of New Jersey by way of them being trustees. All right, tenants in chief. All right, those are the ones who took the property and transferred by way of what we call common recovery from Intel to fee simple. All right, and then gave it to the Native Americans. I mean, parts of which they claim they got from Native Americans, which they know they're lying. They did not get it from the Native Americans. All right. They did not get it from the Native Americans. I know I lost a couple of subscriptions, but that's okay because sometimes the truth hurts. All right. The truth hurts. And when you're lying up with the truth, you got to come correct. All right. Instead of proving me wrong or attesting what I'm saying, they chose to just leave or non-subscribe, which is okay. All right. It's okay with me because I'm not in it for your subscription, right? I'm not in it for your subscription. Get there. So we're talking about the American Enlightenment, right? American Enlightenment. American Enlightenment was based upon liberalism, all right? Liberalism. Since 1960, histories have debated the Enlightenment role in the American Revolution. Before 1960, the consensus was that liberalism, especially that of John Locke, was paramount. You hear that? Was paramount. Republicanism was largely ignored. Did you hear that? Did y'all hear that? I hope you did, because if you didn't, it's not going to make sense for where I'm about to go now. Okay? It's not going to make sense from where I'm about to go now. All right? So let's go ahead. Everybody familiar with the Gadsden's flag, right? Everybody familiar with the Gadsden's flag? This was a flag in regards to the founding fathers, all right? Their founding fathers' symbol that they used in regards to their independence based upon the revolution was based upon liberalism, okay? Liberalism. You must understand that, all right? The Gadsden flag is a historical American flag with a yellow field depicted A timber rattlesnake, coiled and ready to strike. Beneath the rattlesnake are the words, "Don't tread on me." Some modern versions of the flag include apostrophe. Okay. This is very important because we have to understand the transition of what's going on at the time of the colony. Okay. We must understand what's going on. The rattlesnake was a symbol of the unity of the 13 colonies at the start of the Revolutionary War. All right. We're talking about Garden of Eden. All right. We're talking about the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, all right, in the Garden of Eden, you know what I'm saying, being introduced by a snake. Okay. Being seduced by a snake. Right. Very important to understand that because this all concerns the birthright. This all concerns the birthright that the Creator promised to Adam and Eve through the process of what we call Livery of Seisin, through Livery of law and not Livery of deed. Okay, by Livery of law and by not Livery of deed, but it's still a process of Livery of Seisin. Okay, because we see Thomas Jefferson, as he stated, through their American Enlightenment, that through their Declaration of Independence, they wanted life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness from their creator, but their creator was not the God of the church. It was the God of the state, okay? The God of the state that was in the wilderness. That was in the wilderness, all right? It didn't have no God, didn't have no candlestick lighting the way, all right? And he made the distinction between the candlestick and those who were in the garden protected by that wall of separation. All right. And all those who are supposed to be transferred from that wilderness that they were subject to now and that present day where Thomas Jefferson was in. All right. Along with those who are enlightened, okay, at that time and era. Oh, y'all don't hear me. Y'all don't hear me. Okay. The rattlesnake was a symbol of the unity of the 13 colonies at the start of the Revolutionary War, and it had a long history as a political symbol in America. Benjamin Franklin used it for his join or die woodcut in 1754. Gadsden intended his flag to serve as a physical symbol of the American Revolution's idea, all involving libertarianism in the United States. Okay? Libertarianism in the United States. That's what it involved. Okay? We must understand that. You have variations of it. This is the Benjamin Franklin's During the Die cartoon, one of the first cartoons. As you can see, you have New England, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 states. All right? 8 states. You'll be hitting and missing. See another flag, right? So there's uh, uh, the flag for the United States, and then you have what we call the petition to heaven. What was it called? The pine tree flag. All right, the pine tree flag and the Gadsden's flag. Okay, the pine tree flag and the Gadsden's flag. All right, these two flags represents two different things. Okay, and that's just one uh, depiction of it. All right, and it all has the meaning. What meaning does it have? Let's find out. Let's get John Locke's interpretation. Let's get John Locke's interpretation. So that is Gadsden's flag, okay? We see the Gadsden flag. It all denotes what we call liberalism, okay? Liberalism. Let's go to the pine tree flag, okay? The pine tree flag. So we know the pine tree is symbolic of the pine. And the pine tree is another tree that we use in reference to the Christmas tree. All right. So I'm gonna show you some uh 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 affiliation of the pine tree affiliated with Christmas and show you the symbolism and the pine tree, or what they call the Christmas tree. All right, and make it relative to these facts that I'm giving you in regards to the estate or the intel estate that was promised to Adam and Eve. Okay, prior to them being deceived by that snake in that garden. Okay, which happened to be Thomas Jefferson based upon the Gadsden's flag. Okay, which is a snake we're meant to say join or die, join or die. All right. And what they were doing as a result of that flag, the Gadsden flag, was a result of the war that were going on at that particular time with the Native American. Okay. Yes, with the Native American. How I know? Let's read it for ourselves. Pine tree flag. The pine tree flag or the appeal to heaven flag. Remember, Thomas Jefferson was in the wilderness. All right. They were in the wilderness when they separated church and state. He was asking his creator to give them, let's just go to it again, American Enlightenment. Declaration of Independence. United States Declaration of Independence. All right. From Great Britain. Okay. From Great Britain, which was primarily written by Thomas Jefferson, was adopted by the Second Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776, in Philadelphia, in York, Philadelphia, I might add, and it was under the Constitutional Convention of 1787. All right. The text of the second section of the Declaration of Independence reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator." Okay. What creator that is, I'm uncertain. All right. But they said all men are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So these rights that you so-called have involving life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is subject to the laws of the government that's operating at that particular time. That was the state. I mean, parts of that which was the church. Okay, the laws that were governing at that time, governing that body of politics, was the church. Okay, even though it was under a commonwealth, all right, under a republic form of government, i.e., commonwealth, it was still under the church, which was a fusion of government before you separated church and state through the First Amendment, and which you will call upon your God under the First Amendment, which has nothing to do with the church, but has something to do with some God that you claim was in the wilderness. All right. These are facts. I'm not making this up. You got to see yourself. He's calling on his creator for an inalienable right that he claimed to so-called have. How could you not have an inalienable right when you don't even know your creator? Apparently, you don't like the creator that's there at that particular time. Okay, you know somebody else was there prior to the creator that was there at the time you're declaring your independence. It was the English creator, okay, or the Anglo-Saxon creator God, okay, that was there at that particular time. Let's get it, y'all. Pine tree flag. The pine tree flag, or the appeal to heaven flag, was one of the flags used during the American Revolution. The flag was featured a pine tree with a motto, an appeal to heaven, or less frequently an appeal to God, was originally used by a squadron of six frigates that were commissioned under George Washington's authority as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army in October 1775. Okay, so the pine tree on this flag represent appeal to heaven or appeal to God. Okay, some God that apparently was in the wilderness that was leading them to whatever destiny that they took. All right, whatever destiny they took it in stride. Let's see. There you see it again. The same symbol. Pine tree symbolism. The pine tree has a symbolic in New England. Since New England, not Old England, but New England. The pine tree has been symbolic in New England since the late 16th century, predating the arrival of the colonists. All right? We're talking about the pine tree, not the one on that flag called the pine tree flag or the appeal to heaven or appeal to God. We're talking about the pine tree that was here prior to the colonists came here, which were Jews supposedly by the so-called Native American called the Iroquois Confederacy. All right? And it represents great peacemaking. Okay? We must understand what's going on. The pine tree has been symbolic in New England since the late 16th century, predating the arrival of the colonists after warring for decades. Leaders of five nations, the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk, buried their weapons beneath a tree planted by the Iroquois Confederacy founder, the great peacemaker at Onondaga. So the five or six nations of the Iroquois nation hid their weapons beneath this tree, okay, by under the authority of the founder, the great peacemaker. The tree of peace is featured in the center of the Hiawatha Belt in the Iroquois National Belt, named for the great peacemaker helper Hiawatha. Okay, Hiawatha. Appeal to heaven unlocks understanding. Okay, unlocks understanding. All right, we talked about dealing with the what was it the Establishment Clause. All right, the Establishment Clause under the American Enlightenment of the First Amendment, as stated by Locke, was based off the Second Treaties on Government. All right, we also see that spoken about in regards to the pine tree flag, which was appeal to God or appeal to heaven. All right, appeal to God or appeal to heaven, the which are actually using the same. The pine tree flag and the Gaston flag was a flag that represent their right to a revolution. The Gaston flag was a flag used for the right to a revolution. Let's go back there before we just read this. The rattlesnake was a symbol of the unity of the 13 colonies at the start of the Revolutionary War, and it had a long history as a political symbol in America. All right? Did you hear that? The rattlesnake was a symbol of the unity of the 13 colonies at the start of the Revolutionary War and had a long history as a political symbol in America. Benjamin Franklin used it for his join or die woodcut in 1754. Gadsden intended his flag to serve as a physical symbol of the American Revolution. So we see the pine tree flag uh, was used by the colonists, all right? You know what I'm saying? As an appeal to heaven or appeal to God. And the Gadsden flag was a flag that they used in regards to their right to a revolution, okay? A right to a revolution in regards to their declaration of what they call independence. All right, here we go. Appeal to heaven and Locke. The phrase appeal to heaven is a particular expression of the right of revolution used by the British philosopher John Locke in his second treatise on government. The work was published in 1690 and refuted the theory of the divine right of kings. All right? It refuted the theory of divine right of kings. And where the body of the people or any single man is deprived of their right or is under the exercise of a power without right and have no appeal on earth, then they have a liberty to appeal to heaven whenever they judge the cause of sufficient moment. And therefore, though the people cannot be judged so as to have, by the constitution of that society, any superior power to determine and give effective sentence in the case, yet they have, by a law antecedent and paramount to all positive law of men. We know positive law is law created by statute. Reserve that ultimate determination to themselves, which belongs to all mankind, where there lies no appeal on earth. Judge whether they have just cause to make their appeal to heaven. Now, remember, back to the separated church and state, they separate their affiliation with God. All right, they abandon God. Now they're appealing to God because God at that church was upset with them. All right, yes, God at that time was upset with them. Right, this is what John Locke said. All right. And that all involve a second treatise of government. All right. Second treatise on government. That is involving what we call the 100-Year War, the second 100-Year War. We had the first 100-Year Wars, which were serious wars. Now we're talking about the second 100-Year Wars, which were serious wars, which started with what we call the Glorious Revolution in 1688, based upon the Bill of Rights of 1688, based upon the Claim of Right of 1689. Point so. We're talking about the Glorious Revolution of 1688, which was based upon the Bill of Rights of 1689, based upon the Claim of Right of 1689. Okay? We must understand that and get that up in here. All right? So the second treatise of government, as written by John Locke, refuted the theory of the divine right of kings, which was established by the House of Stuart. Okay? We know Stuart, King James, and all his descendants claimed their right by divine right of kings. All right? So two second treaties on government is nothing more than what we call two treaties of government. Right? Two treaties of government. That's what that's called. Two treaties of government in the former, the false principle and foundation of Sir Robert Filmer and his followers are detected and overthrown. The latter is an essay concerning the true original extent and end of civil government. The true original extent of end of civil government is a work of political philosophy published anonymously in 1689. At the same time of the Bill of Rights of 1689 and the Claim of Right of 1689, which King James used in what we call the Glorious Revolution for the divine rights of kings. All right. The first treaties attacked patriotism in the form of sentence by sentence refutation of Robert Filmer's Filmer's patriarchal, while the second treaty outlined Locke's ideas for a more civilized society based on natural rights and contract theory. The book is a key foundation text in the theory of liberalism. Okay, the same liberalism that was based upon American Enlightenment, as well as the same liberalism that was based off the Establishment Clause, which where they got their First Amendment from, which was the separation of church and state. Okay, to create their own society out in the wilderness, and create their own God to govern their endeavors in that wilderness. All right, we must understand the full story. Okay, because it all is a part of the second 100-year wars prior to the first 100-year wars, which established based upon the conflict with the Plantagenet crown and the Frankish descendants and the Scottish descendants. Okay, the Frankish descendants and the Scottish descendants, as well as the Spanish descendants over here. Over here in the territory now called North America, but we know that the English overseas possession and the Anglosphere goes back to Asherton. Okay, Asherton. Let's get it. Noble Stone. This publication contrasts with former political works by Locke himself and the two tracts on government written in 1660. Locke defends a very conservative position. However, Locke never published it. In 1669, Locke co-authored the Fundamental Constitution of Carolina, which endorsed aristocracy, slavery, and serfdom. Some disputed the extent to which the Fundamental Constitution of Carolina portrays Locke's own philosophy versus that of the lower proprietors of the colony. The document was a legal document written for and signed and sealed by the 8 lower proprietors to whom Charles II had granted to the colony. In this context, Locke was only a paid secretary, writing in much as a lawyer writes as well. Okay, much of as a lawyer writes as well. Greetings, Brother DeVere from the House of DeVere. Good to have you here. Okay. It says this is known as the Glorious Revolution, also called the Revolution of 1688. Did you hear that? This is also known as the Glorious Revolution, also called the Revolution of 1688, which is based upon the Bill of Rights of 1689 and the Claim of Rights of 1689. Okay, so we're talking about what? The true treaties of government, which was based upon, as we talked about, the the pine tree flag. Okay, the pine tree flag. All right. So we just read the two systems of government as established by John Locke, which is based upon the Glorious Revolution and the new authority, the new government that was supposed to be functioning over here, based upon the claim that would that were under the authority of what we call the Scottish monarch. Okay, so let's go back to what we call pine tree flag, just to see that two treaty government again, to know that it's connected. Appeal to heaven and Locke. Okay? Appeal to heaven and Locke. Very important. All right. So who else is associated with this pine tree? Since the pine tree was an emblem or a symbol used to appeal to heaven or appeal to God. All right. Who else used this symbol? Because it said that the Native Americans, and since the pine tree had been symbolic in New England since the late 16th century, predating the arrival of colonists. After warring for decades, leaders of the Five Nations buried their weapons beneath a tree planted by the Iroquois Confederacy founder, the Great Peacemaker, at Wondoga. The Tree of Peace is featured in the center of the Hiawatha Belt and Iroquois National Belt, named for the Great Peacemaker helper, Hiawatha. Okay? That is a false story. How can we prove it's a false story? Let's go here. Pine tree. All right? Let's look up the pine tree. Very important. Before we look up the pine tree, let's look up the Iroquois nation. Iroquois, or the Iroquois Confederacy. These are the 5 nations or 6 nations. What you have here, that pine tree. Everybody see it? There go that pine tree. That's what their flag is a symbol of the pine tree, the white pine. All right, the white pine tree. Tree ain't white. The tree ain't white, but it's just called that. The white pine tree. All right. Want my coffee up? Go back and watch yesterday's lesson because yesterday's lesson will make sense when you watch this one. Okay. If you understand yesterday's lesson, today's lesson will be beautiful. But if you don't understand today's lesson, you better go back and watch yesterday's lesson because it's a package deal. Okay, it's a package deal. The Iroquois, also known as the Five Nations and later as the Six Nations, from 1722 onward. You hear that? From 1722 onward, people who are building the longhouses are an Iroquoian-speaking confederacy of Native American and First Nation people in Northeast North America. Okay, from the 18th century, early 18th century. All right, they were known by the French during the colonial year at the Iroquois League. So they were known by the French during the colonial years at the Iroquois League and later as the Iroquois Confederacy, while the English simply called them the Five Nations. The people of the Iroquois included from the east to west Mohawk, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. After 1722, the Iroquois-speaking Tuscarora people from the southeast were accepted into the Confederacy, from which point it was known as the Six Nations. Okay? All right? The Six Nations. All these nations, Six Nations, are all encompassing the territory, what we call New Spain, parts of New France. Okay? It's called New France. All right? That's why you had the French and Indian War. All right? There was no Indians. All right? There was no Indian. If there were Indians, these Indians were those who came over here by way of the two continents. All right. I don't know why they chose the name, but it came over here on the two continents, as we read in my lecture I did yesterday. All right. So let's just solve this puzzle. Okay. Let's solve this puzzle. Well, we can see the flag. Key point. They chose the flag. Let's just look at the flag. Flag of the Iroquois. The flag of the Iroquois Confederacy is a flag used to represent the Six Nations of the Iroquois. It is a purple flag, four connected white squares, and an eastern white pine tree in the center. Okay? An eastern white pine in the center. Very important. What's important? That pine tree. Okay? That pine tree. So what is a pine? It's low. It meant something to them. All right. The pine tree actually meant something to them. They said that the Native Americans, the Iroquois, buried their weapons underneath that tree. Okay. They called it by the name by the Great Peacemaker. Okay. The Great Peacemaker. All right. And we understand this tree was an appeal to heaven, all right, for the colonists who were warm with the Native American. All right. It was an appeal to heaven because they were out in the wilderness fighting who? Native Americans. All right. In the wilderness, who both made claims of territory, but the one who had a more favorable claim was Native American based off the concept called time immemorial. Time immemorial. Time at a mind. Okay? Time at a mind. Lumber from pine tree is called pine. It's one of the more extensively used type of lumber. There are currently 818 named cultivars of trinomials recognized by the ACS. It is known well type of Christmas tree. Okay? A well-known type of Christmas tree. So why did it say Christmas tree? Because Christmas tree is what I want to focus on. All right. We all every Christmas we go cut down one of these trees and put it in our house, light it up. You know what I'm saying? And we know it's symbolic of the 12-day Christmas. We also recognize that it's affiliated with Jesus, the birth of Christ, and all this other stuff they associated with it. All right. So you must understand that the pine tree, all right, was an appeal to heaven, according to people who have a culture. All right. So the pine tree, based off the colonists, was an appeal to heaven once they got into the wilderness. All right. And we know that the Native Americans also held the pine tree symbolic. Okay. They held the pine tree symbolic. And majority of us, if we're not Native American, we most associate the pine tree with Christmas, with the Christmas tree. All right. So let's look at the Christmas tree. A Christmas tree is a decorated tree, usually an evergreen conifers, such as a spruce, pine, or fir, or an artificial tree of similar appearance associated with the celebration of Christmas. Okay? Of Christmas. You already know that part right here. Origins of the modern Christmas tree. Modern Christmas trees originated in Central Europe and the Baltic states, particularly Estonia, Germany, Livonia, now Latvia, during the Renaissance and early modern Europe. In the 16th century, origins are sometimes associated with Protestant Christian reformers Martin Luther, who is said to have first added light candles to an evergreen tree. The Christmas tree was first recorded to be used by German Lutherans in the 16th century, with records indicating that Christmas trees were placed in the cathedral at Stroutenburg in 1539 under the leadership of the Protestant reformer Martin Bucer. Did you hear that? The Moravian Christians put light candles on those trees. The earliest known firmly dated representation of the Christmas tree is one of the keystone sculptures of the private home in Turkheim, Alsace, then part of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, today part of France, was the date of 1576. Did you hear that? So the Moravian Christians put light and candles on their trees as well. Keep that name, Moravian Christians, in your thought pattern. We're going to talk about them again in a second, right? But the possible predecessors for the Christmas tree and the meaning of the Christmas tree, which we know as the pine tree, which the Native American used it for other purposes, and we see the colonists made it for other purposes in regards to the colonists calling on their creator for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in the wilderness. And we know that the Native American used it as a symbol in regards of their nation that was just being started in the 18th century. But yet the history of the pine tree, as well as the symbolic meaning of the pine tree relative to Christmas, goes back even further. All right? Even further than the Moravian Christians who started the putting the fixtures on the Christmas tree. All right? We must understand how important it is this lesson is. All right? Let's build, y'all. So now I'm gonna give you the reason why you have a Christmas tree and the meaning of it versus the false meaning of it. I just showed you the false meaning of it. Now I'm gonna show you the true meaning of it based off the precedence of where the pine tree meant. Okay? The precedence of what the pine tree meant. Because we know that Thomas Jefferson in the wilderness is making an appeal to God or to heaven, okay, based off that pine tree. Okay? Right? And we know that Native Americans is used to represent their nation who were warned with those who are appealing to heaven. Why? Because they fight amongst themselves. Now realizing that the predecessor of the pine tree and those who created symbolism of the pine tree predates how they're using the pine and lieu of its representation. Okay, let's see. Possible predecessors for the Christmas tree. Modern Christmas trees have been related to the tree of paradise, a medieval mystery plays that were given on the 24th of December, the commemoration of the name day of Adam and Eve in various countries. In such plays, a tree decorated with apples represented fruits from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So your light bulb were and your light bulb was representation of the apples. Okay? Did you hear what I said? Your light bulb are representation of the apples, represent the fruit of the good and evil. Okay, I didn't say that. We're reading here. Modern Christmas trees have been related to the tree paradise of the medieval mystery play. All right, the tree of paradise of the medieval mystery play. We talked about that yesterday. That were given on 24th of December, the commemoration of the name date of Adam and Eve in various countries. In such plays, a tree decorated with apples represented fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Thus, the original sin that Christ took away, and round white wafers to represent the Eucharist and redemption was used as a setting for the play. Like the Christmas crib, the paradise tree was later placed in homes. The apples were replaced by round objects such as shiny red baubles. Okay? Did y'all hear what I just said? Did y'all hear what I just said? Fir trees decorated with apples serve as the central prop for the paradise play, a kind of folk religious drama often performed on December 24th. These props were called paradise trees, and some researchers believe that they were the forerunners of the Christmas tree. Did you hear that? So the paradise trees were the trees used in the mystery plays, going back to what we call the Regalias Concordia. Okay, let's look what the tree of paradise is before we go to the mystery plays. We talked about that yesterday, but most of y'all must have thought I was crazy, but now you won't think I'm crazy today. All right. Tree of life. In Judaism and Christianity, the tree of life is first described in chapter 2, verse 9 of the book of Genesis as being in the midst of the Garden of Eden with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. After the fall of man, lest he put forth his hand and taken also of the tree of life and eat and live forever, cherubim and the flaming sword are put in place at the east end of the garden to guard the way to the tree of life. The tree of life has become the subject of some debate as to whether or not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the same tree. Okay? So metaphors, y'all. We're dealing with metaphors. Christianity. The Eastern Orthodox Church has traditionally understood the tree of life in Genesis as a prefiguration of the cross, which humanity could not partake of until after the incarnation, death, and the resurrection of the Jesus. This means the age of the Messiah, or the return of the Messiah, as we talked about in the Style of Turning, and as what we talked about based upon the crown of thorns. We already talked about that in past lessons. If you don't understand those lessons, then you won't understand what we're talking about right now. All right? So we see the tree of paradise has to do with the mystery plays concerning Adam and Eve, knowledge of good and evil, as well as the age and return of the Messiah. Okay? So what are these mystery plays, okay, we talked about? Right? Mystery plays and miracle plays, they are distinguished as two different forms, although the term are often used interchangeably. Are amongst the earliest formally developed plays in medieval Europe. Medieval mystery plays focus on the representation of Bible stories in churches as a tableau, which accompanied antiphonal songs. They told they told of subjects such as the creation of Adam and Eve, the murder of Abel, and the last judgment. Often they were performed together in cycles which could last for days. No different than what you've seen in the movie Thor, when Thor came back to Asgard, father was sitting down on the couch eating grapes. All right, watching that a play about themselves. Okay, we must understand what's going on. Origin of the mystery play. All right. The early origin of the mystery plays concerning paradise, okay? Not the abstract, all right, that you want to believe, but the true paradise, which was told based off the mystery plays, and then it became a renaissance or what they call they became plays and things of that nature and representation of the actual event. It says, as early as the 5th century, living tablets were introduced into sacred services. The plays originated as simple tropes, verbal embellishments of lyrical text, and slowly became more elaborate. And at an early period, chants from the service of the days were added to the prose dialogue. As these lyrical plays increased in popularity, vernacular forms emerged and traveling companies of actors and theatrical productions became common in the later Middle Ages. All right? It's all right here. The Quim Curitus is one of the best known early forms of the dramas. It is a schematic dialogue between the angel at the tomb of Christ and the women who are seeking his dead body. Early forms of the responsorium were later elaborated with dialogues and dramatic action. Early performances were given in Latin and were preceded by vernacular prologues spoken by a herald who gave a synopsis of the events. The directors of the earliest plays were probably monks or clerics. Okay, so this goes into what we call the Regalia Concordia. We talked about this yesterday. All right, we talked about this yesterday because it's all involving the pine tree. Okay, and all involving the pine tree. We know the pine tree is a tree used for representation of Christmas. We know that the colonists used it in their appeal to heaven or appeal to God based upon the flag the pine tree flag, okay, was appeal to heaven or appeal to God. And we know that was based upon their religious practice based upon the First Amendment, which was based upon them separating of church and state. Now, the church already had a God. What God that was is yet to be discovered. Because we know when they broke away from the church, that was called the Church of England. And that Church of England had all us Anglo-Saxons word to the Christianity that you now have. Thomas Jefferson had it. Um, all the denominations that you have it. They just have a different interpretation of worship based upon the religious plays known as what they call them, the mystery plays. All right, the mysteries concerning Jesus Christ, the resurrection, his death, etc. All right, all of it is based on a mystery. Why? Because mystery means out of mind, out of sight. Okay, you don't know. It's a mystery to you. You don't know. That's all it means. You don't know. So that represents time immemorial. Time immemorial. So if you're using the mystery plays which are associated with Christmas, we're associated with Adam and Eve, the Day of Judgment, the fruit of good and evil means bad and good, right and wrong, then that means that you must go back from the abstract and bring it to the concrete. We know the abstract, which came from the church, was based upon the perception of the pine tree, which now through history has become known as the Christmas tree. But we know when the colonists had it, they wasn't using it as no Christmas tree. They were using it as an appeal to heaven or God, right? Europe wasn't using it as an appeal to heaven and God. They knew what the symbolic meaning of the Christmas tree. The colonists used it as an appeal to God as a result of wars that were going on with the Native Americans, known as the Iroquois Confederacy, who used the pine symbolic of their position as a global tribe. All right, or an indigenous tribe, okay, based off their perception of some mess that they don't understand, which we call time immemorial, okay, time immemorial, okay. But we see that based upon the mystery plays concerning Christmas, concerning the pine tree, all right, it said that the mystery plays concerning the pine tree was based upon, as they said, what they call it, Quim Curitus. All right. So just read a little bit about that. All right. Because if anybody you should be appealing to in heaven, it should be Jesus Christ. All right. It should be Jesus Christ. And we know Jesus Christ to us was King Edward the Peaceful, which I'm the reincarnation of. Okay. And he was part of the English church, not the Church of England, which Thomas Jefferson broke away, but led them to go into what we call the wilderness to choose a God of their own. But we come from the church that was here before the conversion of the Anglo-Saxon brethren to the Christianity, which all the monasteries adopted now. All right. As a result of that Bible you have in your possession. Okay, we must understand what's been given to you, and you must make use of what's been given to you. All right. The Regalius Concordia was the most important document of the English Benedictine Reform. The English Benedictine Reform was a reform of the English Church from the Church of England. All right. The English Benedictine Reform. Most of y'all might not believe me, so let's just look at it. Concerning who you're looking for. All right. The English Benedictine Reform. Everybody, please look at the map. You have St. Peter, Mary, and the image of the Christ-like entity or the king. Christ is the station, just like king is the station. The anointing of that individual who's going to sit in that position or office, okay? Flanked by angels, okay? That position that was filled to be filled Christ-like was King Edgar the Peaceful, all right? King Edgar the Peaceful, okay? We must understand that, all right? The English Benedictine Reform or Monanistic Reform of the English Church. You hear that? Not the Church of England, but the English Church in the late 10th century was a religious and intellectual movement in the later Anglo-Saxon period. All right? In the 7th and 8th century England, most monasteries were Benedictine, but in the 9th century, learning and monasticism declined severely. Alfred the Great deplored the decline and started to reverse it. The court of Ashton, we know that Livery of Seisin, based upon the conveyance of land, was done by Ashton. Ashton was the grandson of Alfred the Great. And Ashton, the first king of the whole of England, was a cosmopolitan. So that means that if he was a cosmopolitan, cosmopolitan means universal, okay? Global, all right? So I meant that we're talking about the English Empire, not just a little island you want to call Great Britain, but the Empire of England or Angleland or the land of the angels, as we're going to see, as established and qualified by the west branch of Sasua River, which was a territory encompassed by the so-called Native American Iroquois Confederation, which was a fabricated story created by those who colonized here, such as those of William Penn. Okay, because the concept of town memorial as a legal jargon is used to baffle those who don't know history. But we know if you look at town memorial from a law perspective, it goes back to Richard I. Richard I was the son of Henry II, the son of Godfrey, the fifth Caliban Jew, son of folk, the ruler of Jerusalem, the ruler of Jerusalem. We know Jerusalem is where the Garden of Eden is. All right. Jerusalem is where the Garden of Eden is. All right. Because that's where we shall return. All right. Once we understand the knowledge of good and evil. All right. We got to cook that in the garden because we're evil. All right. We were evil. We were deceived by that snake. All right. We were deceived by that snake. We was forced to do so. You either join or die. You either join or die. Right. And if you didn't join, that means that you was left at the mercy of the Creator who they called upon, and no one knew who that was. All right, so we see that the court of Washington, the first king of the whole of England, was not only a cosmopolitan, but the future reformers such as Dustin and Estherwood learned from the continental exponents of the Benedictine monasticism. The English movement became dominant under King Edgar, our king. Westminster Abbey was established and founded in 959. All right, the English Benedictine reform came to its head in 959, and we know King Edgar, who supported the expulsion of secular clergy from monasteries and cathedral chapters and the replacement by celibate monks. The reformers had close relations with the crown. Did you hear that? Furthering its interest and depending on it for support. All right, you can't you can't hide these. You can't hide these facts. All right. Why do I say that? All right. Because one of those mystery plays were called the Quim Curatus. All right. And what it said. One of the largest topics found within the manuscript is the foreword of the harmonies of the rule, which is meant to apply to the monks and nuns of the entire nation that ruled under King Edgar. This section of the document proclaims that every religious house and the kingdom was to follow the rules prescribed in the rest of the manuscript. This included how the monastic offices was to be performed. Office included vigils, laws, and prayers, and the practice that were established in the 5th century. All right, 5th century. All right, King Edgar ruled in the 10th century, so these laws were preserved from the 5th century all to the 10th century, in which we are resurrected as a result of this decline. The prescriptions for the monastic office are specific. For example, it includes specific liturgical songs to be performed during the monastic office. To be performed during the mandated labor hours that they were required of the monk. The portions of the manuscript dedicated to the rite of the Holy Week of Easter are the most detailed. This is where the introduction of Quim Curatus is introduced and is now credited to being the introduction of theatrical rituals, the mysteries of what they call the mystery plays. The regalias also created the specific pattern in order that bells to be rung in the masses on holidays. Okay, we see it right here without a shadow of a doubt. All right, why do I want to go there? So we know that John Locke talks about the two treaties of government, right? Two treaties of government, and we know two treaties of government are based upon body of politics. We know that Adam and Eve were deceived by a serpent, okay, to move from God's government to some other government where God wasn't there. That's symbolic of the separation of church and state, okay? That's symbolic of the separation of church and state, where God's people are living God's church, all right? Because God is not there. God was represented by the king. King informs the God, and king enforced God's law, all right? That's why Jesus was called the King of Peace. Who? King Edgar the Peaceful, okay? The King of Peace. My name is Clifford Jefferson. Jefferson means peaceful territory. That's why I'm King Jefferson, all right? The king of this peaceful territory, all right? So we understand that the body of politics that were governing here on earth was based upon that body of politics governed by those angels. We know those angels are Anglo-Saxon burghers under their body of politics and not under the body of politics established by Leviathan. Okay, let's see. The body politic is a polity such as the city, rim, or state, considered metaphorically as a physical body. All right. So we're talking about a city, rim, or state. All right. We know that the crown was a state church. All right. Not a state slash church, state separate contrast to a church, but it was a state church, meaning a body of politics. Okay. A physical body of politics. When they separated from that body of politics on the church state, it was no physical body now. It became an abstract body because all your hopes and dreams are in the air. Historically, the sovereign is typically portrayed as the body's head, and the analogy may also be extended to other anatomical parts, as in the political regions of Aesop's fable, the belly and its members. All right. The image originated in ancient Greek philosophy beginning in the 6th century BC and was later extended in Roman philosophy, following the high and later medieval revival of the Byzantine corporate Jewish Symbolism and Latin Europe. The body politic took on a jurisprudential significance, but by being identified with the legal theory of corporation, gaining salience in political thought from the 13th century on. In English law, the image of the body of politics developed into the theory of the king two's body, the crown as a corporation soul. Okay, did you hear that? The crown as a corporation soul. All right, so that's a social contract, a social contract or a social compact. We must understand that. A social contract or a social compact. Give me a second. King body politics in England. In Tudor and Stuart England, the concept of the body politic was given a peculiar additional significance through the ideas of the king two bodies, the doctrine discussed by German American medievalist Ernest Kantorowicz in his eponymous work. Eponymous work. This legal doctrine held that the monarch had two bodies: the physical king body natural and the immortal king body politic. Upon the demise, not interregnum, upon the demise of an individual king, his body natural fell away, but the body politics lived on. This was an indigenous development of English law without precise equivalent in the rest of Europe. Did you hear that? Extended the identification of the body of politics as the corporation. English Jewish argued that the crown was a corporation soul, a corporation made up one body politic that was at the same time a body of the realm, and its parliament estate is also the body of the royal dignity itself. Two concepts of the body politic that were conflated and fused, i.e., a fusion of government, not a separation of government like you had a separation of church and state. That's why you have no king. All right? You have no king. And no king, that means that you're not in God's garden, because that means there is no candlestick there, like Thomas Jefferson told you when they separated church and state, because they know that they were in the wilderness, and the wilderness was not God's garden, and that they appealed in that wilderness for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness based off that call upon their creator. Okay? The creator got them to leave the garden, and we know that creator was that snake. All right. The creator was that snake, the Gatson flower. All right. The one who spoke to Adam and Eve. All right. And you know, Adam and Eve is nothing more than a mystery play that's told in England. Okay. In regards to the pine tree. All right. We know the pine tree represents the Christmas tree. All right. We know the Christmas tree goes back to symbolism used all over the world, particularly speaking, Native Americans, i.e., Iroquois Confederacy, in regards to the symbol of their nation, based upon the time out of mind perception of their right to be on our land, contrast to that which was used by the founding fathers through their what we call flag called the pine tree. What was it called? Pine tree flag, which was an appeal to heaven or appeal to God. All right. Yeah, we climbing, y'all. We climbing in this understanding. Leviathan. The social contract. Body of politics, now social contract. All right. And moral political philosophy. All right. Social contract. We're talking about social contract. Body of politics is based upon the social contract. All right. In moral and political philosophy, the social contract is an idea theory of models that usually, although not always, concerns the legitimacy of the authority of a state over the individual. Conceptualized in the age of enlightenment, it is a core concept of constitutionalism, while not necessarily convened and written down. It is constituent assembly and constitution. That's the American Enlightenment. That is the American Enlightenment. Did y'all hear what I just said? That is the American Enlightenment. All right. Prominent 17th, 18th century theorists of the social contract and natural rights include Hugo de Groot, Thomas Hobbes, Samuel von Pufendorf, John Locke, John Jacques Rousseau, and Immanuel Kant, each approaching the concept of political authority differently. All right. So you got all these people talking about social contract and social compact. All right. Social contract and social compact. All these people are talking about that. All right. We understand that determines your government. All right. That determines the type of government that you have. Now, why is this so important? Because we know that the Native Americans had their own government. We know that the colonists wanted to establish their new government. And we know there was a government that goes back to time immemorial that preceded them both. Okay, that precede them both. All right. Let's go back to the what we read yesterday in regards to um, uh, the Iroquois Confederacy, which we talked about again today, as well as the Native Americans, the colonies coming there at that particular time. All right. And known as what they call the Shamokin Village. Right. This is just revisiting again. We already talked about. The Shamokin was a multi-ethnic Native American trading village on the Susquehanna River, located partially within the limits of the modern city of Sunbury, the Shamokin Dam of Pennsylvania. It should not be confused with the present-day Shamokin, Pennsylvania. All right? Yes, continental flag. As you can see, Shamokin, the American village, Elamah Dunami, place of crawfish, or Iroquoian language, Oskanathan, or the demon's den. All right? The demon's den, also called Oskanathan in the Iroquoian language, is in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Okay? As I repeat, Sunbury, Pennsylvania. The community is also sometimes referred to by the Iroquois name Oskanathan, which was according to Count Zinderdorf, the name of an Iroquois gave to a large cave and a rocky hill in the wilderness. Once again, we're talking about the wilderness, right? We're talking about the conflict that the Native Americans had and the colonists had as a result of the conflict of wars with the Native Americans and the colonists, which resulted in what we call the war between the five civilized tribes. Okay, the five civilized or the six civilized tribes called the Native American tribes, which consists of the Iroquois Confederation. We know the Iroquois Confederation symbol is represented by a pine tree. We know that uh uh the plea to heaven or the plea to what was called um a pine tree flag was an appeal to heaven or appeal to God, which they also used a pine tree. Okay? They used a pine tree. We know a pine tree origin goes back to the Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree origin goes back to what we call the mystery plays concerning all about God, Jesus Christ, Adam and Eve, their judgment, resurrection, and what we call everything else that we need to know in regards to the story that we ain't getting the whole picture of. Okay, so we know that concerning the Shapkin brothers in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, concerns the Native American tribe called the Iroquois tribe, as well as other tribes. Okay, let's just see. Sunbury, because Shamokin village was in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. That's what they said, right? It was in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. The history of Sunbury. The first human settlement of Sunbury were likely Shawnee migrants, a large migrants at that migrants, immigrants through a diaspora. A large population from Delaware Indians was also forcibly resettled there in the early 18th century after they lost rights to the land in the walk-in purchase Canada Sogatego of the Six Nations, enforcing the walk-in purchase on behalf of George Thomas, Deputy Governor of Pennsylvania, ordered the Delaware Indians to go to two places on the Susquehanna River, one of which was the present-day Sunbury. Did you hear that? Sunbury, based upon what we call the walk-in purchase. Anybody ever heard of that? The walk-in purchase. Let's look at that. The walk-in purchase, also known as the walk-in treaty, was a 1737 agreement between the family of William Penn, the original proprietors of the province of Pennsylvania, and the Lenape Native American Indians in the purchase. Native American Indians. In the purchase, Penn family and proprietors claimed that a 1686 treaty with the Lenape ceded an area of 1,200,000 acres in present-day Lehigh Valley in northeastern Pennsylvania and in colonial Pennsylvania, which includes the western land boundary extending as far west as a man could walk in a day and a half, which led to its name. Okay, now we understand that I live on Lehigh Avenue, right? My 360 Lehigh Avenue, that's my address today. So it's no coincidence that the word Lehigh is being mentioned today dealing with Lehigh Valley. All right. Even though the first seat of government in New Jersey was in Perth Amboy under the Provincial Council of New Jersey under the Crown. It says the area is along the northern reaches of the Delaware River on the Pennsylvania border, which was called at the time West Jersey. The Encyclopedia Britannica referred to the treaty as a land swindle. Did you hear that? A land swindle. Lenape appealed to the Iroquois Indian tribe to their north for aid on the issue, but the Iroquois refused their request, ultimately siding with Penn's interest. Did you hear that? They sided with Penn's interest. Man, this is getting good. This is getting good. So that means that the Iroquois were the grantors to William Penn. Okay, did you hear that? The grant the Iroquois, the Native American tribes, which were made of 6 tribes, all right, which symbol is the pine tree, all right, sided with William Penn. And we know William Penn acquired his land through the Livery of Seisin ceremony that goes back to Ashton, okay? Goes back to Ashton, all right? Grandson of Alfred the Great, all right? So the Encyclopedia Britannica, the one who verified that in 1911, in 1789 Encyclopedia, says that the Anglo-Saxon Berbers were the ones whose government was known as Britain, and their uncode law was called the Magna Carta, okay? The Magna Carta. So we know that under the Magna Carta in Wittemont, that goes into the body of politics that was here before it was overthrown as we said, the second 100-year wars called the Glorious Revolution through the claim of right, through the Bill of Rights of 1689 to overthrow and to overtake and to sit on the English throne. Okay? We must understand what's going on. So this is walking purposes. This is library of deed, not library of season. I mean, library of law, but library of deed, which is a library of season ceremony that was used by William Penn. Because as I said, a walking purchase. A walking purchase. Okay? We must understand what's going on. All right? Time immemorial. I don't know why I got to keep coming here for y'all. Apparently, I got you. Time immemorial. Time immemorial is a phrase meaning time extended beyond the reach of memory, record, tradition, and indefinitely ancient, ancient beyond memory or record. The phrase is used in legally significant context as well as in common parlance. The common parlance is called legal jargon, all right, or legal term of art. Or if you're using it as a legal term of art, you're talking to Native Americans, right? If you're using it as under the common law, you're talking to Anglo-Saxon Burghers. In law, time immemorial denotes a period of time beyond which legal memory cannot go, right? And time out of mind. Most frequently, the phrase time immemorial appears as a legal term of art in judicial discussions of common law development in the United States, the property rights of Native Americans. So they use time immemorial in reference to the property rights of Native Americans based upon legal terms of art used in judicial discussions, but not based upon proving the rights of possession of property going back to where time immemorial, the concept time immemorial actually originated from, which is from Richard the First. Okay, from Richard the First. In English law, time immemorial ends and legal memory begins in 1189. Did you hear that? In English law, time immemorial ends, okay? And legal memory begins. So prior to legal memory, that was considered time immemorial and the end of the reign of King Henry II. So King Henry II was the son of Godfrey, the fifth Crown of Anjou, who was associated with the invention of the common law. So the invention of the common law is a law that was here based off the usage going back to time immemorial. All right, that wasn't written down. It was just a way of us just normally doing things. Okay, Richard First Lionheart being anointed during his coronation at Westminster Abbey in 1189 from the 3rd century Chronicle, anytime before the ascension of Richard I, is considered time immemorial and English law. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? All right. So anytime you hear that word time immemorial, you can either look at it from a common law way, which goes back automatically back to Henry II's descendants, or if you look at it from a legal term of art, which is legal jargon, and discussions of property rights, then you deal with it from dealing with Native Americans. Okay? All right. So if you're Native Americans, then all discussions and proofs that you use to prove your property cannot be done because you have no validated precedents to validate your right to the property which is in question because it's nothing more than legal jargon. Contrast to time immemorial, time by the mind, where reach a memory of record tradition and definitely ancient, you cannot go. All right. So that means that you must have a path to pull those records or make those records come forth. That's what we're doing, right? So let's prove it. Going back to Oscar Knotson, the book we read yesterday. All right. And we know Oscar Knotson in the Iroquois language means what? Demon dens. Demon den. All right. Demon den. History of West Branch Valley. You know, history of West Branch Valley is associated with what we call West Branch of Saskatchewan River. Okay. We must understand that. The indenture or the contract made the 9th day of October in the year of our Lord, 1793, between Clara Helena Ellinghoosen of the town of Louisburg and the township of Buffalo in the county of Northumberland and Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Widow of one part of Flavel of Rome of Esquire of town of Sunbury, all right, and a country and Commonwealth of Forster Esquire of the other part. So we know Sunbury is in Northumberland, okay? Once again, Sunbury is in Northumberland. If you know history of Northumberland, that Northumberland is a town, is a term used for territory in what we call England, okay? And this involves the so-called deed that are being created by the two individuals in question. All right, what was the name again? Lavelle Roan and Clara Helena and Lou and Link Houston. And the name and on the 9th day of our Lord. What Lord are they talking about? What Lord exists in 1793? Right? What Lord exists in 1793? We all need to ask ourselves, right? What Lord? Why? Because it's based upon a grant from the Lord. All right. Just like Adam and Eve got a grant, they getting a grant from the Lord. All right. Clara Helena Ellen Hoopson and Flavio Rome getting a grant from the Lord. Okay. And they're tracing this grant all the way back to Adam and Eve. All right. Adam and Eve, the Cosmos was fighting over land, the Native Americans were fighting over land, and they used the symbol of a pine tree representation of that fighting. And we know the pine tree is symbolic of the Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree is symbolic of the mystery plays concerning Adam and Eve and the promise given to Adam and Eve in regards to the estate that God had for them, which they were supposed to be entering into them. But they were deceived by who? That snake, right? That snake. Just like the Indians were deceived by that snake, either you join or die. In lieu of his enlightenment to take over these people's land, identified as Native American. We know the Native American story identified their history with a pine tree. Okay, in the 18th century, but we know that Native American Indians are not native to this land because we're going to read it right here in this book called Oscar Knotson on what we call or the West Branch of Susquehanna River. Okay, let's read it. I'm going to show you the title as well. I look at the title in closing. Read this book yesterday. Read over a couple of times. Right, so it ain't like it's new. We read this already. We're gonna read it again in closing. I want to hold you long. Okay. Oscar Knotson is a Iroquois language that means demon of dens, demon of dens, or the history of the West Branch Valley of the Saskatchewan River. All right, of the Saskatchewan River. All right, let's just look at it again. That's it, y'all. Shamokin or Oscar Knotson. That sounds like Oscar Nazi, right? Similar. All right. Place of crawfish or Oscar Knotson, the demon den. All right. The demon den. Everybody said. You go back to the book, which we're going to close out on. This book is about the demon den. All right. The demon den, the history of the West Branch Valley of Susquehanna. All right. An account of the fair play system by the fair play men, and the fair play system by the fair play men was based upon squatters or settlers. Okay, squatters or settlers. All right, that's what it's about. Squatters and settlers, families who squatted and settled on land that don't belong to them. Right, undisputable. See the title. History of the West Branch Valley of the Susquehanna, or what they call Oskanatsu. Right? And we see the Lord, all right? They made this in this deed that they're talking about in the name of the Lord, their Lord. Okay? That's what it said, in the name of their Lord. So whoever they made this deed in front of, which happened to be a Lord, is aware of the terms fee simple and fee and tell. All right. They apparently are aware of fee simple and fee tell. All right. Whoever this Lord is they're talking about. Let's read it again. The indenture, or the contract, or the agreement. All right. The social compact. All right. That's what we're talking about. The social compact, the social contract between God and his people and the devil and his people. In this case will be angel, and the other case will be a serpent. Okay. An angel, and the other one will be a serpent. Right. All right. We know Leviathan represents the serpent who instituted a government that is based upon an aggregate people. All right. Agri people versus which represents the state, contrast to God's government, which represents the church. All right, represents the church, with God's law governs the church versus the state where God's law is not, which apparently must be the wilderness, where Thomas Jefferson them are in. All right, in the wilderness, we know that the Native Americans dwelt within what? The wilderness. Why? Because you're dealing with, they wasn't living in houses, coming out of hotels in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. All right. They wouldn't walk around with suits and things on. All right. So we have to really look at the picture and get a good grasp of who actually take what events are actually taking place and who are the people in these events that are taking place. Because it said right here, there was an agreement or a grant, which is the deed made on the 9th day of October in the year of our Lord, 1793. Okay, 793 in Philadelphia. I mean, in Pennsylvania. So there's the Lord in Pennsylvania. Okay, there is some Lord in Pennsylvania. Whether we're talking about God or individuals sitting in the position of God, a station, a title, I don't care what it is, but it says in the year of our Lord. And it must be an important person because they made a reference to, he didn't say my Lord, it said our Lord. That means that Lord was governed not just one individual, but a bunch of people. Okay? Based on what we're reading. I didn't write this. So their Lord witness, all right, a conveyance made between Clara Helena Ellinghusen of the town of Lewisburg and the township of Buffalo, and in the county of Northumberland in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a widow of one part and flower of Rome of Sunbury, okay, who is an esquire, a lawyer, all right, who is an esquire. Now look at the language in the deed. Whereas the creator, we know he ain't talking about Thomas Jefferson creator, because Thomas Jefferson is in the wilderness. All right. He's in the wilderness. If he's talking to Adam and Eve, then the creator must be in that garden. Okay. He must be in that garden. It says here, whereas the creator of the earth by parole and livery of Seisin, we know what livery of Seisin means, delivery of a possession, did in fee, I mean, and we know in fee means entrusted, all right, entrusted with the parents of mankind. So I'm gonna read it verbatim. Whereas the creator of the earth by parole and lobby of Seisin did enfeoff the parents of mankind, to wit, Adam and Eve, of all the certain tracts of land called and known in the planetary system by the name of the earth, together with all in singular the advantages, woods, waters, watercourses, easements, liberties, privileges, and all others the appurtenances whatsoever thereunto belonging, or in any wise appertaining to have and to hold to them the said Adam and Eve, and the heirs of their body lawfully to be begotten in fetail and general forever, as by the said beefman recorded by Moses in the first chapter of the first book of his record, commonly called the Book of Genesis. More fully and at large appears on the reference being thereunto had. Okay, let's define fetail real quick. Since we know that the birthright that Adam and Eve had was fetail, and that covered the planetary system called Earth. All right, and Adam and Eve descendants were heirs to that estate that covered the whole earth. Okay? It said fetail, specifically fetail. Okay? Let's pull it up. Right there. Fetail. Everybody see that? Everybody see that? Fetail. Let's find that. Let's define fetail. In English common law, so I mean that God, that Lord must have been an English God, right? And we talking about the whole earth or the planetary system called Earth. They spoke about in that conveyance to those two individuals, all right, about the conveyance of land and fee tell. And fee tell is intel. So it means that whoever that lord was an English lord. In English common law, fetail intel is a form of trust established by a deed of settlement that restricts the settlement inheritance of an estate and real property and prevents that property from being sold, divided by will, or otherwise alienated by the tenant in the possession, and instead causes it to pass automatically by operation of law to an heir determined by the settlement deed. The term fetail and tellilize are from the medieval Latin fidum tellitum, which means to cut fee. Fetail deeds are in contrast to fee simple deeds. Did anyone hear that? Okay, let's go back to the deed. Right? This fetail deed was recorded in the book of Moses and the book of Genesis. This was incorporated in the Dome book of Alfred the Great, called the Mosaic Code. Okay? Called the Mosaic Code. We right here, everyone. Listen. And whereas the said Adam and Eve died, seed of the premises aforesaid in fetail, meaning that they had an estate in fetail, and that estate in fetail was seized. Watch. And whereas the said Adam and Eve died seed, that means interstate. When heirs die, it becomes interstate. Now it's subject to what we call extinctment. Each tip is under inquisition post mortem. Okay? So whereas that said Adam and Eve died seed of the premises aforesaid, seed of the property. Premises and property denotes to the possession from something or somewhere. So whatever that property was, it was seed. It said Adam and Eve died seeds of the premises aforesaid in fetail general, leaving issue. Did you hear that? Leaving uh, uh, leaving a gap in the chain of title. All right, leaving issue. heirs of their body, to wit, sons and daughters who enter into the same premises and became thereof seeds as tenants in common by virtue of the donation aforesaid, and multiplied their seed upon the earth. And whereupon, in process of time, meaning that after that, the heirs of the said Adam and Eve, having become very numerous and finding it to be inconvenient to remain in common as aforesaid, bethought themselves to make partition of the lands and tenements aforesaid to and among themselves, as they did according to make such petition. All right. So that means that afterward, they made a petition to take on other lands, all right, as promised, called land and tenements that they petitioned. And whereas by virtue of the said partition, made by the heirs of said Adam and Eve, because Adam and Eve was wiped out, and all the property that Adam and Eve had was under intel, was actually taken by way of what we call alienation, because a gift or a grant is a sort of donation. A gift is a donation. It's called a voluntary donation versus an involuntary donation. An involuntary donation is a result of interstate. Okay. If no one dares to claim it, it becomes abandoned, which is called bona vacatini. Okay? So we know as a result, Adam and Eve died, right? Since Adam and Eve died, their descendants multiplied upon the earth. And whereas in process of time, the heirs of said Adam and Eve have become very numerous, and finding it to be inconvenient to remain wherever they was, in common as aforesaid, bethought themselves to make partition of the land and tenements aforesaid to and amongst themselves, and they did accordingly make such partition preparations. And whereas by virtue of the said partition made by the heirs of said Adam and Eve, I descendants, all that certain tract of land called and known on the general plan of the said earth by the name of America. Did you hear that? By the name of America. Parcel of the said large tract was allotted and set over unto certain of the heirs, unto certain, to make sure. Did you hear that? Set over unto certain of the heirs aforesaid to them, and to their heirs, general and fee simple, who enter into the same and became thereof seeds as aforesaid, and their dance made as a fee, and people the same allotted land and severity, and made partitions thereof, to and among their descendants. So I mean that somebody else came and occupied the land, right, through the process of fee simple that was formerly occupied by way of intel. All right, so it was occupied by intel, and then it was allowed by way of what they said. What was the word they used? Donation. All right, it was donated. All right, as a result of it being reoccupied. Let me see where it is. And whereas the said Adam and Eve died, seed of the premises aforesaid, in fetail general, leaving their issue, heirs of their body, to wit, sons and daughters who enter into the same premises and became thereof seeds as tenants in common by virtue of the donation aforesaid. So that means that now the land they no longer own the land, they became tenants on the land, which means they had to work on the land. Okay? They had to work on the land. And whereas in process of time, the heirs of said Adam and Eve, having become very numerous and finding it to be inconvenient to remain in common as aforesaid, bethought themselves to make partitions of the land and tenements aforesaid to and amongst themselves, as they did accordingly make such partition. Whereas by virtue of the said partition made by the heirs of Adam and Eve, made by the heirs, partition made by the heirs of said Adam and Eve, all that certain tract of land called and known on the general plan of that said earth by the name of, hear that plan, the general plan of the said earth by the name of America. Parcels of the said large tract were allotted and set over unto certain of the heirs. So there were allotted lands that people were overseeing, i.e., trustees, and being looked over until it was certain that their heirs, as mentioned before, said, and to them and to their heirs, juror and fee simple, because the land had to transfer back from fee simple to fee and tell, who entered into the stand and became thereof seed, as before said, and their damsel as fee, and people with the same allotted land and severity, and made partition thereof two amongst their descendants, and whereas afterward now deemed in time immemorial. Did you hear that? Now deemed in time immemorial. So time immemorial goes back into time out of mind, which is the proof you need to prove your descendancy, because based off this land conveyance, it was made by a lord. And the conveyance that was made by the Lord, and the Lord was just not one Lord, it says their Lord, our Lord. They made it in the presence of their Lord, and that in the presence of their Lord, based off the fee simple estate, goes back to the creation of Adam and Eve when they were created in the world called the earth, and talking about the whole earth and that little part of the world called America. Okay, and it said that that little part that they petitioned for, that when they got there, it was being overseen by somebody else who didn't originally originate there. All right, how we know it? Let's read it, because we know time memorial in legal jargon, or what we call a legal art form, was based upon judicial discussions and the property rights of Native Americans, because they wanted to make sure that the Native Americans' uh, 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 claim to land was honored, but it was limited. It was still subject to encumbrances because they didn't own the land alone. Okay, whether you own a fee simple or fee intel, it's still subject to the allodial title of the king, which the king wasn't there. It was nations of North America, which was the sixth civilized tribe of the Iroquois nation. All right, it's free. Whereas afterward, now deemed in time immemorial, a certain united people called the Six Nations of North America, heirs and descendants of the said grantees of America. Did you hear that? A certain united people called the Six Nations of North America, heirs and descendants of the said grantees of America, became seized, and for a long time whereof the memory of the man runneth not to the contrary, have been seized in their damsel as a fee. All right, in in as a fee of in certain tract of country and the land in North Division of America, called and known at present on the general plan of the said North Division by the name of Pennsylvania. And whereas the said United Nations being so thereof seized afterward to wit in the year of our Lord 1768 by their certain deeds of people with library of season, did grant a bargain and sell deed, bargain and sell, release in fee, alien, and confirm to Thomas Penn and Richard Penn, otherwise called the properties of Pennsylvania, through what they call it a walk-in purchase. They call it a walk-in purchase. Do y'all hear what I'm saying to y'all? A walk-in purchase. So somebody walked on to the land that was governed by Adam and Eve, given to him by the Creator God, which we call our Lord, right? And apparently must have been an English Lord under the common law of England. Why? Because if the so-called deed was filed in the county, goes back to Adam and Eve. Okay, goes back to Adam and Eve. Let's prove it. Where was this deed filed? Whereas said Richard Peters by his certain indenture bearing date 7th day of November in the year of our Lord 1773, did grant bargain and sell the last mentioned tract and parcel of land containing 320 acres and allowance with the appurtenance unto a certain Louis Durr and fee simple as in the same deed recorded in the office of recorder of deeds and in the county of Philadelphia. I think I missed. Okay, so we see that by way of a walking purchase, they was able to walk right on our land and steal it through what we call acquisition of prescription or prescription of sovereignty. Okay, prescription of sovereignty. there you have it. All right. So all those who attend this lecture today, you can definitely see that um, Pennsylvania was a state that was colonized by way of the authority of Charles II, by way of the Second Hundred Year War, which encompasses the uh, the Glorious Revolution, the Bill of Rights of 1689, and the Claim of Right of 1689, based upon the English throne. And then that transferred into what we call uh, the 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 role that they played here in North America under what they call the British Crown. Okay, under the British Crown. So, in a nutshell, there you have it. All right. So please, all those who watch this series of lectures, this is part 3. Go back and watch part 1, part 2, and part 3. And by the time you get to part 3, if you watch 1 and 2, you'll be at the same level I'm. Okay. I know it's a lot, but you have to. Yes. The flag of New England is the pine tree. New England. Hence the word New England. Let's see. Let's pull it up. New England. You go. You go. You right on point. Brother DeVere from the House of DeVere, you right on point. Let's show the people. Show the people. You make this stuff up. Can't make this stuff up. New England. You got it. You got it, y'all. There you have it. Non-official and appeal to heaven. All right. And appeal to heaven are common de facto model. De facto model. There you have it. All right. And they were warned against the Native Americans. So each of them was using the pine tree for different reasons. Okay. White pine tree, exactly. Okay. You have it right there. All of it was a fraudulent story. Okay. All this was Anglo spear. All this was part of what we call the Anglo spear. All right. The Anglo spear. Thank you, Brother DeVere from House DeVere for sharing that. That people was able to get a visual, seeing that they don't even know that history concerning the pine flag. Okay. The pine tree, what was called the pine tree flag. All right. So I thank you for that. So with that, if you got any questions, Brother DeVere from House of DeVere, any questions? Okay. All right. So again, I'm letting you know that Sabbath day was canceled, but it will be rescheduled at the convenience of Bishop Searchy and Archbishop Belmont. So be out for that notice, as well as the door will be opening up soon. We're just doing some internal work, as well as those who are able to uh, uh, providing for gifts, donations, anything they see fit that they want to, share with us at the Third Community Church. We're open to it, as well as we're an open platform. Those who want to schedule uh, uh, a live stream with us or to discuss the topics that were revealed to you, we're open to that. All right, but please come in with some decor. We ask that if you do wish to sign up uh, for a forum or a meeting, uh, you make sure you stick to the topic. Okay. Once again, share. You know what I'm saying? Share information that you are receiving, especially to those platforms that are there just to fleece the people. Okay. All right. Once again, all those who claim to be leaders, you know, I'm here. The guide is here. All right. Once again, I just wish that everyone can put their jealousy aside and give honor where honor is due. Okay. All right. Because I'm going to hold you accountable for your so called claim of being in honor. Because if you're not honoring your forefathers, then you have no honor at all. Okay. So with that, I'm going to greet you as I meet you. And I meet you and greet you. As always in peace. Right. As always in peace. Thank you again for Brother DeVere for showing up today. Class. All right. I really appreciate you. And I think we had someone else. Was that we're going to rest, and I'll see you with the next lesson. All right. I probably won't give one tomorrow, but probably the following day.